and building a solid one. And you know what? A huge part of a really good culture is going to be determined by who you decide to build with and who you give a platform of influence to over your team. I highly recommend you choose people who are emotionally mature to build with, build a culture with, build a business with, because one, you can trust them, and two, they add value.
That was really good. Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, I don't know. There is a very small number of people who are so emotionally mature that I could leave the table and my thought never has to go, I wonder if that conversation turned to me. Build with people that you can leave the table.
It normally does turn to you.
I'm sure it does.
It's funny.
It turns to me before I even leave. I'm
like, you know what she said about that preacher?
The preacher is not coming because she's I'm sorry.
Okay, so let's just define some terms here. What is emotional maturity? It simply just means being able to manage your emotions no matter what the circumstances are. And it has absolutely nothing to do with your age. Because I know a lot of emotionally immature people who are older than me, right? Or younger than me. And a lot of emotionally mature people who might be even younger than me. So the thing is, you can learn it, you can develop it. We're about to give you a list of signs of emotional maturity, what that actually looks like in reality. And none of us have all of them. So we're all going to struggle with different ones to some aspect, because ain't none of us perfect, but you can grow in any of these areas.
And I want to challenge you, when you're hearing this list, don't just try to think about how it applies to your team. Really analyze, where do I fall on the emotionally mature scale? Because I'm telling you, there are some of you that place yourself at a much higher rate on the scale than you really need to be. And that's okay. But spend some time also reflecting on yourself, not just on your team, how this applies to them. This also has to apply to you.
Yeah, so emotional maturity is important as a leader, especially. We're talking to leaders today. And so this applies to you as a leader. Like, it also applies to who you're looking to build with, but look at yourself as a leader, because do you enjoy working with a leader or an upline who is not in control of their emotions? Nobody wants to be under a leader who is like that, okay? So this is really important. So when Christina was talking about integrity earlier, just how well do you hold up under pressure? That's basically what this is, okay? Because challenges are inevitable. You're not going to be successful without some failure in there, some disappointment, maybe some catastrophes, or at least they may feel that way. So how well you hold up during those times, it says a lot about your character. That is integrity. All right, so what does emotional maturity look like? First thing is, and I would say this is the biggest, taking ownership. We have said this word so many times today, guys, because it's so important for you as leaders to take ownership. This is holding yourself accountable, taking responsibility for what you're responsible for, and not feeling like you're a victim of someone else, of your circumstances, or the flip side of victims, flip side of the same coin is entitlement. So not feeling like you're entitled to something that you're not entitled to, okay? So they don't blame others when things go wrong or when they don't reach their goals. They're not blaming their upline. They're not blaming their downline. They're not blaming their team. My team doesn't do XYZ. If my upline would do this with me, then I could be more successful. So they're not blaming. Example of blame. I can't grow fast because my upline won't do 3-way calls with me. Or I could rank up if my team would blank. Basically, I can't blank because someone else won't blank. That's victim mentality, and that is not emotional maturity. You have to take ownership. You are responsible. Your success is up to you. Now, can you be successful alone? No. But are you responsible for what everybody else does? Also no. You're responsible for you and the action that you take.
And then you want to add that part.
Okay. So if you have this victim mentality, or like I said, entitlement, other side of the same coin. When you're coaching your team, if you have these thoughts of my team should do this, or if my team would do this, I could, whatever, you are going to be coaching from a place of irritation. Your team will sense that you're trying to get them to do what you want them to do. They are not going to feel connected with. They're not going to feel like you're telling them what to do because you're invested in their success. They will feel pushed, and they might even feel manipulated. They can sense if you are for them or if you're for yourself. Okay? No matter how hard you try to hide it, they will sense that. So you need to put the ownership where it belongs, not on your team. And I'm going to talk more about coaching tomorrow, so I won't go too deep into that here. But you definitely don't want to go into irritation mode while you're coaching your people, because people sense it. I already said that earlier. Oh, complaining. Instead of complaining about all of the minor things that annoy you, nobody likes to be around a complainer. Do you guys like to be around people who constantly find the negative, or they're complaining about any minor thing? That we all have things that annoy us, or pet peeves. But if that's the main thing that comes out of your mouth all the time, you're not a very pleasant person to be around. Don't you like to be around people who keep a positive attitude? So don't complain. Instead of complaining, take ownership and find a solution. If there's a problem, be solution-oriented. And then have humility to admit mistakes when you make them. Guys, everybody knows if you made a mistake. And it says a lot about your character if you're willing to admit that you made a mistake. They know anyway, so confess it. Apologize if necessary. This is taking ownership. Being willing to admit that you made a mistake. Okay?
And this has happened in our relationship numerous times. Numerous times she's like, hey, we need to talk about something. And I was like, great. I always know. Like, uh-oh. And listen, you have to be receptive to that. If she had to be afraid, oh my gosh, I need to talk to Christina about this issue, but it's going to involve a ton of emotions, probably crying. She's going to get really defensive. She's probably going to tell me all the reasons that I was wrong too. She would probably not as freely criticize me as she does. But if she had to be concerned about that. But what we have a history of her saying, hey, listen, when you did this, I felt this way. Help me understand why that happened that way. And sometimes I have to defend what I've done. I still would do it again. There was reason behind it, and I'll explain that. And sometimes I have to be willing to be like, you know what? Man, I could see why that would come across that way. That was not my intention. Listen, that wasn't the right thing to do. What do we need to do to move forward?
Yeah, I have this on a later note, but I'm going to put it here. I'm only saying that because I don't want to. But anyways, yeah, that's a perfect segue into the next point, which is people who are emotionally mature can accept critical feedback without going on this emotional roller coaster. This is so important as a business owner, as a leader, and also as a downline. Because the people that I enjoy working with the most as a leader, they are the people that I can offer critical feedback, and I don't have to worry about the aftermath of that. Like I do criticize Christina because she's tough. She can take it. But really, when I think about my level 1 leaders, and I have quite a few of them, they are all emotionally mature. Like I can be honest with them and tell them things that they need to do to grow without having to worry about the just days of emotions and crying or even getting defensive. Guys, that is the worst for a leader. It really is. And it's hard to build that way because when somebody responds that way, it feels unstable. You can't build on that, right? So you need to develop control over your emotions, okay? And just know that if you are sensitive to critical feedback, you can grow through that. You can grow through that through developing your confidence, adding value to yourself, doing personal development, adding value to others. All of these things boost your confidence. And then just taking ownership, knowing that every single person makes mistakes. None of us are Jesus. Every single person makes mistakes. And so when someone has to call out one of yours, then hopefully they'll do it the right way. We're going to tell you how to do it the right way in just a little bit. But yeah, emotionally mature people, they can handle criticism. Okay, next one is willing to be vulnerable about struggles. So being honest about how you feel about things so that others don't feel alone. If you have this need to come across as perfect all of the time, like I don't have any struggles, I mean, that makes you kind of unapproachable. And so it's okay, and also, I guess flip side of that coin would be careful about how vulnerable you are, because your downline doesn't need you to be extremely vulnerable. Like, they don't need to know all of your problems, right? So there is a balance there. But it is important for you to be somewhat, but if somebody's struggling with comparison on your team, don't sit there and act like you've never compared yourself to somebody. Give them examples of who your sidelines are and who you struggle comparing yourself to, right? That's vulnerability. Or like parenting struggles. Don't act like you don't ever have any parenting problems. Just own it. Like, your kids, they're not Jesus either. They make mistakes. So if you feel the need to come across as perfect all of the time, that's not emotional maturity, all right? Be willing to ask for help when you need it. This also requires humility, not being a know-it-all. The people who are most successful, I feel like they ask the most questions. They're not sitting there thinking, oh, I got it. I know how to do this. I don't need anybody's help. They really are asking questions, and they're humble enough to receive the answer. All right, the next one is for emotional maturity. Have healthy boundaries. This means you are able to say no when it's necessary for you to say no. So we've talked a lot about time blocking and being intentional, and you're building a business. Sometimes people will think, oh, she's at home, she can do X, Y, Z, she has extra time, but you have to be the business owner who says no. And what if you had like a 9-to-5 job? Would you be able to say yes to that request? If you had a 9-to-5 job, this is how I gauge what I'm going to say yes or no to. If I had a full-time 9-to-5 job, would I be able to fulfill that person's request? And the answer is no, then I'm still going to say no. And I'm going to let go of the guilt. You have to decide what God would have you to do in this hour of your day. Okay? People that have healthy boundaries, they don't allow people to disrespect them.
Sure don't.
That means you go Medea. You say, I will cut you.
Cut you.
I'm just kidding. Not really cutting you. But for real, Christina, you want me to try to disrespect you all the time?
Listen.
You put up with disrespect.
You know I don't put up with no disrespect.
No, we don't put up with disrespect.
Listen, you teach people how to treat you. So if you're over there and you're like, well, I don't know why she keeps doing this. I mean, every single time this happens, your fault. You teach people how to treat you. And you have to nip that jump right in the bud in a loving way and say, hey, listen, here's what I always say, listen, I can tell that you're upset. And I feel you. I've been upset a time or two, but there's not anybody in my life that I allow to talk to me this way. My husband don't talk to me this way. My kids wouldn't have teeth if they talked to me. So when you're ready to have a normal conversation, we're going to talk. But I'm not going to do this back and forth. I'm not going to do the passive aggressive. I just flat out won't tolerate it. And listen, they'll get mad before they get over it, but they'll be okay. They eventually will respect the boundary. You don't allow somebody to, here's the thing. I'm either going to set a boundary for them or they're setting the boundary for me. And I'm after freedom, remember?
Yeah, so one small example of that comes to mind. A lot of times I'll have a leader come to me and say, well, when I'm trying to message this person, this worker on my team, they will respond to this type of message, but I know that this one issue, like I send them training videos, they don't respond. I'll say, have you watched the video? And they don't respond, but then they'll come to me asking me product troubleshooting questions, and they want me to respond. And I'm like, okay, so you're allowing that. If they want your help, like they're asking for your time, they're wanting your help, but you're trying to help them by sending them, hey, here's a resource that would help you. Have you taken the time to watch that? They don't want to take the time to A, respond to you, or B, watch the resource that you've given to them, but then they still want to keep asking for your time. You need boundaries there. You set the boundary, and you can do that lovingly and politely. And you can just simply say something like, hey, you know what? That video that I sent you actually addresses that. Did you have a minute to watch that yet? Right? So you're putting the boundaries there to let people know how to treat you. You're not going to allow people to just ignore your questions and then still ask of your time, right? So that's an example of putting boundaries in place. All right. Boundaries. People with healthy boundaries, they know their own needs and they clearly communicate their needs to other people. All right, the next one is showing empathy. So that means they know how to put themselves in someone else's shoes. And that could be something sad that happened, or it could be something happy that happened. When you're able to show empathy, it means you can genuinely be excited and joyful for someone when they rank up and you don't. Or when they earn that shopping spree and you don't. That's empathy. This is emotional maturity. If it turns into jealousy, check yourself. That's pride.
That makes me think of Michelle. When Brittney had me and Michelle in a contest one time, and she almost killed me. And the contest ended at 11:45 at night?
It ended at midnight.
At 11:47, I had a student's mom order something, so that put me in the head of the contest. And I'm telling you, I never had to worry, like, is Michelle gonna hate me? What we won I got to go as her guest to the gala. So it was a big deal. And the entire month, I think we were gracious to each other, friendly competition. We would send each other like, booyah, suck it, got one.